Good afternoon, everyone. And for anyone tuning in from East or West, perhaps good evening or good morning. I'm Anique Michaud, and I lead the corporate relations work at Anglo American. And my function is responsible for much of our company's engagement with our wide range of stakeholders and communities, and of course, our employees. You are very welcome today in our virtual world to our annual sustainability performance update to the investment community and indeed our wider stakeholders across society. As many of you know, we normally hold this update in April, but like so many things this year, we had to reschedule. We do hope that you and your loved ones are keeping safe and well during these trying times. So why are we here today? For many years now, going back to 2003, in fact, Anglo American has hosted this update to what to be used to be termed the SRI community, socially responsible investor. As time moved on and as sustainability became more mainstream, our audiences have grown and we, of course, have welcomed that trend. There is simply no debate that all the issues that get bundled into the E, the S, and the G are right at the heart of how we conduct our business. They're not adjacent, they're not somehow separated or dealt with on the side. So it's good to see more of our investors and other stakeholders recognize how vital sustainability is to any businesses licensed to operate. Our performance across all aspects of sustainability and our financial performance and ability to generate returns are inextricably linked. It's really that simple. We are going to be covering a fair amount of ground today, beginning with a health and safety share from Mark, who will then reflect on the situation in Kabwe, Zambia, and then cover how sustainability is integrated in everything that we do, and then talking about our pathway to carbon neutrality that we committed to in May earlier this year. My colleague, Tony O'Neill, our technical director, will then pick up the baton and update us on progress with a number of our game-changing technologies, all of which bring both substantial environmental benefits as well as cost and productivity improvements. I will then come back and talk to you about our approach to social performance and our updated social way, and will then provide insights into how we have injected all the right governance around our holistic approach to driving a truly sustainable business. Mark will then wrap things up with a reminder about where we're heading with our portfolio, and we will then proceed to the Q&A. So we're going to be using Menti for the Q&A. So can I ask you to go to menti.com, input the code on your screen that you see now, and the link is also in your invite. For those dialing in, the code is 5484605. Please begin your typed question with your full name and the organization that you represent. I will also ask you that you keep your question concise. So with that, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Anique, and hello, everyone. I'd also like to echo Anique's warm welcome. Like Anique, we're sorry we can't be with you personally. It's been quite an extraordinary year, and by the looks of things, we're going to be isolating for a bit longer, unfortunately. What I will say, in terms of the events of this year, it has reminded us how important it is that we look after each other and those that depend on us, both in our personal and professional lives. You may have heard us talk about our We Care program this year, and this is the program we put together in response to the challenges posed by COVID-19 for our employees and our host communities, working to protect physical health and mental health, to support so many aspects of the lives and livelihoods in our communities, and to help tackle the scourge of gender-based and domestic violence. Now, I'd like to start with a short video that gives you a glimpse of We Care, a program that our employees are very proud of and has certainly brought us closer together as a team, and in particular, it's brought us closer to our communities. And certainly there's been a lot of learning in almost every dimension of our business, and I suspect it's also helped communities understand what we're about in the business. So, Glenn, if you can cue the presentation on WeCare.
The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every one of us. And that's why it's more important than ever that at Anglo American, we stay true to our purpose of reimagining mining to improve people's lives. WeCare is our global lives and livelihoods support program, formed in response to the effects of COVID-19. Its core goal is to protect the health and well-being of our more than 90,000 employees and contractors around the world, and the communities where we operate during the pandemic. There are 3 intersecting phases of support provided within the WeCare program. We are working to prevent, respond, and help employees and communities recover from the health, social, and economic effects of the pandemic. These elements of support exist within the 4 core pillars of WeCare, which are physical health. We are providing education and encouraging behavioural change to support personal health and hygiene. A network of testing laboratories has also been put in place to assist with treatment and care. Mental health. We've built on our existing mental health and well-being resources to provide more tools and reassurance to help us cope with stress and uncertainty. Living with dignity. Our partnerships with health authorities and charities are helping us to identify people at risk of gender-based and other forms of domestic violence and direct them to the support they need. Community response. By working with each of our communities and establishing what matters most to them, we've been able to create unique responses that are tailored to their individual needs. Now hear the stories from employees and community members from our operational regions across the world.
After nearly 9 months of COVID, the range of measures and controls implemented have become the new norm here.
The program is working, and the support we're giving, I'm proud of being part of Anglo American and the WeCare program.
Aquí hay mucha gente de bajos recursos que necesitan realmente el apoyo que se le está brindando por Anglo American.
I feel supported and quite safe. I feel safe as well with the measures that are in place.
Ahora se agradece muchísimo que ellos, sin que nosotros dijéramos nada, ellos en forma voluntaria se acercaron hacia nuestro hospital para ofrecernos la ayuda.
During the coronavirus pandemic, we have been so grateful to Anglo American.
Esto, por supuesto, que merece un reconocimiento y un saludo también para los trabajadores. La minería chilena nunca le falla a Chile.
The plans that you put in place were absolutely perfectly well executed.
Fico feliz em saber que temos conhecimento das medidas de combate ao Covid e torço para que logo possamos voltar ao normal junto de quem amamos.
Yo creo que es una muestra de una política diferente de lo que es responsabilidad social de empresa.
Agradeciendo también el apoyo de la empresa privada Anglo American para colaborar con las pruebas.
We're in this together. This is the Anglo way.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. I guess we could say that it was all very well putting together WeCare, but we also had an urgent job to do. Very clearly, we had to make the operations safe. We had to make communities safe. And in particular, I'm talking about from a health perspective, but obviously on a much broader basis as well. And we had to engage both local governments, regional governments and federal governments for them to understand what we were doing to keep people safe so that they would allow us to continue to operate when at a time many businesses were being forced to close or to actually literally fully close down. When we're able to point out the things that we provided, the provision of water, energy, in many cases food parcels, those conversations became a lot easier. And when they saw what we were doing, we were able to demonstrate that the community was safer when we were engaged and part of the whole. During the intense first wave of COVID-19, we worked with our host governments, employees and communities to discuss the extent of our role in so many of those communities. often in remote rural areas. And as I said, the provision of energy, water, working with schools, working with the health community, and in many cases, rebuilding some of the healthcare facilities that we had used in the past was very important in terms of providing the support in those communities that was required in the early days of COVID. And in particular, providing expertise in areas of health that the local communities didn't have. That simply illustrates the breadth and scale of our socio-economic contribution. One of the things that struck me in all of our conversations was how little people knew how things worked in their own communities. And when we sat and worked with those community members, we were able to demonstrate supply chains and how all the pieces fit together, and how the mining industry plays its part in making sure that even your daily lives are different as a consequence of us being in the community. This work was also combined with demonstrating how we adjusted our operations to allow social distancing, how we had engaged our workforce in adopting all the right health and hygiene measures, and how we put in place numerous controls around health screening at multiple points throughout the working day. We were able to continue the majority of our operations because of the work we did in those first few days. Our approach and spirit of partnership was critical in sustaining continuity of operations, which helped maintain wages and salaries and to keep water, energy and food to many that would have been materially impacted if we'd stopped operations or if any of those services had been stopped for any extended period. The spirit of cooperation and partnership was absolutely key in driving a coherent and constructive response to COVID. And from our perspective, it's something to build off again as another demonstration of what we do as a company and what we do in the mining industry in terms of making a difference in our communities. Next slide, Glenn. Before we get to the meat of what we want to discuss today, I do want to first reflect on what's going in Kabwe in Zambia after last week's news of litigation. As you may have seen, a certification application has been filed in South Africa in relation to alleged contamination in Zambia, dating back more than 50 years since our involvement. So from our point of view, we're naturally concerned of the situation at Kabwe and the suffering that comes from any contamination. It's just not acceptable anywhere in terms of mining legacies. These allegations stretch back to early last century, with Anglo American's involvement in Kabwe operations ending in 1974. And in fact, the operation was nationalised in 1970. Prior to that, Anglo American had minority interests at various levels in the company that owned and operated the Kabwe mine and provided various services to the mine. But we weren't the operator of the mine, nor were we ever the majority owner. The Kabwe mine was then nationalised and operated by the state for more than 20 years until it was closed down in 1994. So, therefore, there is a complex set of facts. We intend to defend our position as we don't believe that Anglo American is responsible for the current situation. I obviously understand that that doesn't help the people of Kabwe, and I realise that. And of course, we have every sympathy for their plight. I hope you will understand that I really can't elaborate more at this stage, given it is subject to a legal process, but we'll endeavour to keep you posted through the process as we try and understand what the basis of the litigation is, given, as I said, we haven't been involved for 50 years, but we'll see where we go from there. Okay. Now, in terms of the broader conversation today, as Anik mentioned in her introduction, when I look at the business we lead today, sustainability considerations are at the heart of everything we do. If I step back and look at how we run the business, it can really be distilled into this one slide. We are guided by our purpose every step of the way. We drive for effectiveness as measured in terms of generating free cash flow, and that allows us to pay dividends, to reinvest in the business, to invest in sensible and profitable growth, and in terms of making sure that we're sustaining our business for the long term. Our sustainability pillars actually make sure that we are sustainable in every dimension, ranging from safety, health, environment, social performance, right the way through to how we maintain a conservative balance sheet and being able to take up opportunities. If we unpack it for a second, reimagine mining, and I'm talking about the purpose, focuses on what mining could be and how we need to envisage the mining company of the future. It highlights how we can think differently and innovatively about mining and our entire value chain. Many of you will have seen the presentations that Tony's presented regarding how mining really hasn't changed over 100 years and how we think for the next 100 years there has to be dramatic change in the way we operate, in the footprints that are created as a consequence of what we do, but at the same time recognising that the world cannot function without our products, but we still have a very significant responsibility to local communities and making sure that our impact on them is minimised while our impact on the world is maximised in terms of our positive contributions. And in terms of improving people's lives, as I've mentioned, a purpose is more than just about the work we do. It's about the impact we have on everything and everyone we touch, and importantly, the way we do our work. Our purpose enables us to articulate in a simple manner the total societal impact that Anglo American brings, both in the commodities local to our operation, or the communities local to our operations, and globally with the metals and minerals that we produce. Now, in terms of sustainability and how it is integral to our strategy, we've got to say up front that it is a much used term, of course, and it means different things to different people. For us, and many of you that have seen this graphic before, it is at the heart of our strategy, not as an adjacent activity, but embedded in the way we do our work. A sustainable business is purposeful, it's competitive, it's resilient, and it needs to be agile to adjust and embrace the world as it changes and evolves in many different ways. It's a business that thrives through both economic and social cycles. Much of what we are driving for, particularly in terms of our environmental ambitions, relies on many of the technologies and digital approaches we are taking. Hence, the interconnection between our technology work and our sustainable mining plan under Future Smart Mining, which you've heard about many times before, and obviously Tony will give us another peek in terms of what that means more specifically in terms of the sustainability conversation. Future Smart is one of the most explicit ways in which we are living up to our purpose. It is industry changing. It is globally a changing approach to the way business should be undertaken, and that goes beyond the boundaries of mining. So, our sustainable mining plan always evokes a few questions about what does that actually mean. Many people have heard us talk about sustainability in the broader sense, and they talk about sustainability strategies. The reason we've used the word sustainable mining plan is it invokes, as it should, it's not simply about some airy-fairy targets that are out there somewhere. We are constructing pathways to deliver on the targets that we've set ourselves across the business. And we're closer to a plan which is about executing towards those targets than is about setting a target without giving thought to how we get there. This is where we started, and this is what we developed in 2017, and we'll reflect on those learnings and our progress in those plans during the course of the presentation. The plan itself focuses on 3 pillars: healthy environment, thriving communities, and being a trusted corporate leader, which you should notice map to E, S, and G, each one with 3 associated stretch goals that we must reach by 2030 and a set of nearer term targets, including for 2020. Again, measuring progress towards those objectives. These goals are underpinned by a set of critical foundations, minimum requirements that apply across our business. Our industry has to address critical challenges of safety, productivity, and the way we use our land, energy and water. And for those that track our monthly or our quarterly presentations, you'll note that safety, we've improved more than 70%, in environmental more than 95% in terms of exceedances, and in terms of our social, our alignment with social way, we're almost up to 95% across the business. As our global population grows, these improvements and society's expectations come together. There is a greater demand for minerals and metals, core components of the products and services that are essential to human progress. And people need to know that we're a responsible provider of metals and minerals. But it's more than just about the work we do and the footprint we leave. We are part of people's lives. People who demand and deserve more than just high product quality. Modern society rightly expects the mining industry to make a positive contribution to socio-economic development while reducing its environmental footprint and supporting, and at the same time, we need to be supporting biodiversity. Our sustainable mining plan is transforming our entire business and is designed to deliver value to all of our stakeholders. And on that note, I'm encouraging a mindset shift. If we're going to connect with society and the 7 billion people who rely on our products every day so that we do what we do, and what we do is enable and is understood and better valued, then I believe we need to think more like a B2C industry, not a B2B industry. That is, we have customers that generally understand what we do and we connect with them well. But as Anglo American, we're looking through our customers to consumers and trying to make sure that we add value to our customers in their journey to satisfy their customers and ultimately our end consumers. This is a very different way of thinking. Certainly you've seen it with De Beers and our precious metals business, but in fact, it's something we're adopting across our whole business. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking for the mining industry. And certainly in our case, we think it's a natural extension of the way we should be thinking. And when people start to talk scope 3, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, you'll start to understand why it's important that we think in that way, in the broader sense, and for the long term. Looking at our 2020 targets, and in order to help the business focus on the priorities of keeping our people and communities safe and of sustaining our operations during the COVID-19 pandemic, our board decided to allow flexibility around the 2020 targets by extending the time period to 2021. Obviously, the resources required to make sure that our response to COVID was appropriate were significant. It literally meant we doubled the work we were doing. And from our point of view, we thought that was the appropriate focus point. And therefore, there was an extension in some of the key programs into 2021 in terms of our transition to 2030. We don't believe that change will impact our ability to achieve things in 2030, but we thought it was exactly the right thing to do. And from our point of view, and in terms of engaging with communities, it's been a great exercise and has helped inform other things we're doing on our way to that journey in terms of 2030. Thanks, Ben. Next one. Thank you. So we talk about a healthy environment. Each of our 3 global sustainability pillars comprises 3 goals. They're deliberately ambitious and designed to challenge us to lead and innovate. Starting with the environment, I'll pick out some broad points, and all our specific targets are set out for each pillar in the appendix. In summary, we're on track towards net positive impact in biodiversity. As detailed in Anglo American's 2019 Sustainability Report, we are resetting the water baseline data this year to ensure that the reporting criteria are aligned with ICMM definitions for water accounting. That work will be completed by the end of this year, and we'll start reporting against our 2030 targets from 2021. So we're harmonising the measures and the things that you would know and understand from the broader context of mining through the ICMM. We will update on the delivery of our 2020 targets early next year, and we've identified the additional water projects to implement in the coming years to drive towards our 2030 targets. And on energy, we hit our 2020 emissions reduction target a year early, but we are slightly behind where we want to be on an absolute energy reduction, and that requires some further work. But again, Tony and the team with the operations teams are well on track to pull that back. On thriving communities or social, good progress on all fronts. Our education program in South Africa is up and running, already supporting more than 100 schools, and we are pressing ahead in other countries as well, including with digital literacy. On health and wellbeing, we're on track with developing our intervention strategies to meet the SDG 3 targets in our host communities, with initiatives varying according to the different needs in the different countries. And as you would expect, each country is in a different place, and so their needs do vary. And on livelihoods, where we are aiming for 5 jobs created or supported offsite for every job onsite. We're working with our long-standing enterprise programs in South Africa, you would know that as Zameli, Chile, Peru, Brazil, as well as through our procurement reach. So good progress on those fronts, but again, continuing work required, particularly as we look at the future of work and other programs that will impact our ability to deliver on those targets, but they remain absolutely central to all the work we're doing. As a trusted corporate leader, our third pillar, it's about governance. This area encompasses a wide range of activities, includes being a leader in transparency. And from our point of view, the executive leads the conversation, but the board has a very important role in making sure that we are being held to account in terms of the delivery of the programs and that we've got the right support infrastructure in place to deliver on those processes. So we're all in this together. In product provenance, where our end consumers are paying more and more attention, our ability to make sure we're ticking all the boxes is very important, and being a leader in tax transparency is very important to us in that context. This is where we're also working with the likes of IRMA to provide assurance about ethical value chains, with our Unki PGMs mine in Zimbabwe being our first mine to complete that process, and at Barro Alto in Brazil, close behind, with several more of our major sites going through this rigorous assurance process in 2021. And for those that aren't aware, Anglo American has been the leading mining company in this process. In fact, it got down to 2 of us at one stage because it became so challenging, but we've stuck with it. We've now got a pathway. We've now got a generally practical approach, still some adjustments required based on the learnings, but we're there and we're leading the process. And there are now starting to be more colleagues joining us in that process, which is great. I think it's really important for the mining industry to align on these sorts of things in terms of provenance, to give shareholders, to give our customers confidence that we're doing the right things. If we now look at what we're actually doing on some of the specific day-to-day measurables, you have seen these charts before at our half-yearly results in July. At first glance, you will see consistent performance across the business with a better than 80% reduction in fatal incidents, a 95% reduction in health incidents, and a 97% reduction in environmental incidents, all achieved since 2013. On safety, while our performance continues to materially improve, we have been reminded this year that we're not where we need to be. And yes, in the last 9 months, we've had our best ever run in safety without a fatal incident. But in the last quarter, we've had 2 fatal incidents. And so again, there is continuing learning. But as you can see from the chart, we've made significant progress, but we're never there until we hit 0. And from our point of view, I think it's important to point out that we've had 2 fatal incidents since the half year. And that for us is tragic and disappointing in terms of the progress, but we will get there. The only debate is when. We want it to be now. And on the environment, improvements have kept incidents to a minimum, but the focus is to get to and keep them at zero. In particular, it's a focus on eliminating repeat incidents that's being led by our environmental team through what we call Environment 365. And on the health side, I should add the point on COVID. Obviously, that's been central to the work we've been doing and is also connected to our We Care program. So, in looking at the work we're doing and looking ahead on energy and emissions, and specifically greenhouse gas emissions, in 2019, we met the 2020 milestone to reduce our emissions by 22%. So we've come in 12 months early, which is encouraging. A year ahead of schedule. Total energy consumption, our total energy consumption increased to 86.5 million gigajoules. In 2018, it was 83.9. This represents a 3% increase compared with 2018 and a 5% reduction against our business as usual scenario. The rise in energy consumption, driven by the return to production of Minas Rio and construction progress at Quellaveco copper project, was partially offset by lower consumption at Los Bronces, where drought affected production. Now, if you remember, when the original targets were set in 2016, we did a business as usual projection. We forecast then, with the initiatives we're implementing, we could reduce our reductions by 22%. And so we're reporting against that reduction target against business as usual. Now, as we look forward, our emission targets are absolute, and that's the 30%. So from that point of view, yes, we're changing the way we measure things because in collaboration with shareholders and the community at large, we said we've got to make another bigger step change, hence the change measurement approach in looking forward to 2030 and to 2040. In 2019, we also completed a detailed inventory on our Scope 3 emissions, as promised, and the detail of all 15 categories of our Scope 3 emissions is set out on our website. A big proportion arise from the processing and use of our products, especially in steelmaking. So from our point of view, it's really important to understand what we can do as partners with our customers and right the way through to consumer, and what we can do to help reduce those emissions. So it really is about partnerships. And on social, one of the ways we measure progress is our compliance with our industry-leading and publicly available open source social way. We achieved a significant improvement in compliance. 18 of 27 sites achieved full compliance or beyond. 63% of sites compared to 48% in 2018. Notably, no serious non-compliances were recorded in 2019. And again, it's a significant change to from where we started some years back, and it changes the way we think and the way we connect and operate with our local communities. And it doesn't say the job's done. We've still got a long way to go. And for those that have been or heard of the alternate Indaba in Cape Town, you'll note that we've been a presence in the last 2 years, opening ourselves up to very direct and tough feedback. And from our point of view, great companies have to be open, have to take the feedback and understand what you do. And it has to come from people who are on the ground. That's where the really meaningful feedback is meaningful and gives us something we can work with those people. And we will continue to be a participant in that forum. And for that, I think it really is a differentiator in terms of the way we do our work. Now, in terms of measuring progress and reporting to the board, you will have seen this work last year. How we track our progress with the board is very important. We use the KPIs that are tied to our 7 pillars of value. So you'll see safety and health, environment, socio-political, people. We also have our production and resource base. We have our unit cost positions, so making sure we're competitive, and then ultimately having a conservative balance sheet so Stephen can allow us to continue to invest in the best projects to continue to improve our shareholder returns. The scorecard I use, and the one I've shown here, is the scorecard I talk to with the board every 2 months. And it's a traffic light report. Green is on or ahead of progress. Yellow is behind, but not materially behind. So we'd expect to be able to and we talk to what we've got to do to close those gaps. And the red, in the case of safety, if we have an injury, it's red, or a fatal injury, it's red. And so as you saw in 2019, and this is 2019 scorecard, we're a red because we had our 4 fatal incidents. We're obviously doing better, but we're still not at zero. So it remains red, and it remains my most important priority across the business. And it has been since I started. Yes, we've made significant progress, but we've still got a way to go. In terms of health, again, we're making good progress. We consider all aspects of health for our employees, contractors, and our communities. We aim to achieve all relevant targets for each host community under the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. In 2019, we achieved a key milestone by reaching the performance targets linked to UNAIDS 90-90-90 for Anglo-American employees in South Africa. And for those that will remember, about 3 years ago now, we launched with United Nations in Geneva the UNAIDS program, and we've been very proud of what's been done and the great work that's been done within all of our operations. On environmental, again, we've kept our incidents to a minimum, and certainly from our point of view, the focus is to get to and stay at zero, and our Environment 365 program is central to achieving those objectives. This work is part of a responsible and active approach to the environment that includes near, medium and longer-term emission targets, including getting to carbon neutral across operations by 2040, which I will touch on in a moment, and also our proposed demerger of thermal coal operations in South Africa. And on social, I just talked about the progress on Social Way. We're also continuing to ramp up our social economic development contributions in line with the Sustainable Mining Plan, stretch goals, and more topically, our desire to help our communities recover from the impacts of COVID. In particular, we have accelerated our work on collaborative regional development approach in South Africa and the UK around our Woodsmith project. In 2019, we also launched our first enterprise development program in Zimbabwe, which focuses on agricultural value chains. We now have enterprise development programs in all Anglo American's emerging market host countries, which is key to delivering on our livelihood stretch goal of creating and supporting 5 jobs off-site for every job on-site. And for people, we've continued to make progress against our gender representation goal of 33% female representation by 2023. Those reporting to me, we're at 27%, and for those reporting at the next level and above, we're at in excess of 29%. So we continue to improve, and we're doing that, I think, in a way that doesn't threat other employees in terms of being excluded. It's an inclusive program, and the feedback we've had from people has been very positive. Now, towards carbon neutral mining. We set out in May this year our ambition to be carbon neutral across our operations by 2040. Again, this slide brings together that ambition with shorter-term milestones. We understand that setting long-term targets isn't enough, and that stakeholders rightly expect to see our actions now and to see progress in short, medium and the longer term. Again, our focus on our sustainable mining plan is not about throwing out big targets, and if you're at 2050, it's far enough away not to worry you too much today. 2040 is real and is something we have to plan for today, and our 2030 objectives even more so. It's about creating a pathway that you can see and you can track our progress against. That's why we think the way we're articulating and managing this process is different. And it could be better, and we're trying to work each year on improving our transparency and our partnership with all of our stakeholders in terms of what we can do together to get there. We're now targeting 30% absolute reductions of emissions by 2030. This is on Scope 1 and Scope 2 energy emissions. We're driving down our operational emissions, as you've seen, and by 2030, we believe we can be 30% lower, and we believe that at least 8 of our operating sites should be carbon neutral by that time. Now, We are being careful about not nominating individual sites because we've implemented processes across all of our sites, and we believe, and they're working at different areas, and we've been talking to what we're doing at different sites to give you a sense of where we are. But at this stage, we're not quite sure which ones will get there first. So we are being a bit naughty in some respects, and we're setting up a competition across the organisation, but it has to be done within the structure that Tony and the team has put together, working with the operating executives. But it's constructive, we're learning from each other, and it's a three-dimensional approach that gets us all across the line to make sure we hit our 2040 targets. In terms of future smart mining, it's at the core of the changes that we're introducing. And so from our point of view, these are critical steps in making sure we take the organisation forward. It brings technology, digitalisation, and all of those technical changes that we're introducing into a package that ensures we're not only achieving our targets, but we're improving our cost structures and our competitive positions, and we're trying to do that quicker than our competitors. And I'm not suggesting that we're not talking to competitors and working through the ICMM and other processes, but we also understand to ensure that we keep delivering returns above our competitors, that we've got to move as quick as anyone, if not quicker. The tools and processes that we have today will not get us to carbon neutrality as we stand here today. That is why the development of new energy technologies such as hydrogen will play a crucial part. We expect to start trials of our solar-produced green hydrogen fuel cell haul truck at Mahalaquena in the first half of 2021. It's being built now. To give you a sense of scale, replacing diesel and green hydrogen across our entire global haul truck fleet will displace 650,000 CO2 tonnes of emissions each year. That's the equivalent of taking 150,000 cars off the road. This is why Tony and the team have been so keen on doing it. The OEMs couldn't supply it quick enough, so we've taken on the role of designing with our partners, Ballard Engine, a whole range of players, to drive and take the industry forward. We think it's absolutely critical, and from our point of view, it is a transformative step for the industry. Other pathways which complete the picture of our commitment to tackling climate change include the transition of our portfolio towards metals and minerals, which will support a greener, cleaner, more sustainable future. And by that, we were a mining company digging holes. Today, we're a metals and minerals company that works through the value chain to our consumers, both trying to understand what their needs are and identifying new profit pools for our business. And you'll see what we've done with marketing, the De Beers approach, our precious metals business. All of those things are very different to the way the industry has operated over the long term, and we're applying it to all parts of the business. On scope 3, the other point I was going to make on the pathway, the work of energy reduction, the work of the grid systems, nature-based solutions, and the changes to the portfolio that we've been announcing are all about improving and reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions. On scope 3, which we call value chain emissions, we all must remember the one company's scope 3 is always another company's scope 1. So no company has complete control of or influence over the process. Again, that comes back to the partnership we've been talking about all the way through to the consumers of our products. As I've said before, scope 3 is complicated. We committed in February to publish a detailed inventory, and as I said earlier, the 15 categories have been laid out, from those emissions created by suppliers to those created by our customers. And as you know, there's no standard way of estimating scope 3 emissions, so for transparency, we've published our full methodology, and we're happy to take input and feedback on that methodology. We're taking a thoughtful and considered approach to tackling scope 3. We don't want to oversimplify it, but at the same time, we're not dismissive. We are engaged, and that's the point I wanted to make. We won't dismiss the importance of Scope 3. We're right in the middle of the conversations, understanding how we can play our part, what partnerships we have to be involved in so that we can make a difference all the way to consumers. We're all in this together, and from our point of view, the technologies that we're introducing can also be introduced in other parts of the value chain. And so from our point of view, we look at this on a holistic basis, and we're providing support and feedback and feed forward into our systems on what we're doing, and maybe that will help some of our customers and ultimately what things go to the consumers. Okay. So in picking up the point on portfolio, we also have to manage the portfolio in a responsible way. And with that, I'll talk about the thermal coal operations. As we also bring crop nutrients into the portfolio, you can start to see our three-dimensional thinking land in terms of the assets we operate and the markets we support. In crop nutrients, we have a low-carbon, sustainable product to feed the growing world. We are continuing to transition thermal coal operations out of the portfolio. Now, from our point of view, if you look at scale, the potential contribution of crop nutrients is probably double the size of our thermal coal business. So from our point of view, in terms of capital allocation, it's the right call if you're looking at shareholder returns. But it's also absolutely the right call in what we see as managing the transition in a responsible way. Our footprint in thermal coal has come down by more than half since 2013, and it represented just 5% of the group's revenue at the half year. I expect that it will continue to reduce in terms of contribution, and that transition has to be appropriately managed. We need to protect the interests of our employees, the communities in which we operate, our customers and other stakeholders as they are associated with the operations. And we must always remember that the resources we mine are owned by the people, the country. And in being custodians of those resources, we have a tremendous responsibility in managing that conversation and making sure that we're taking into account the thoughts of the owners of those resources and their needs as they transition into new energies. And again, I think it's really important that we play that role and take that role seriously. And when we talk about a just transition, we really do mean a just transition. The assets themselves are high quality, low cost, competitive assets, and they are important to energy generation in South Africa in particular. So that would leave us with them, and we've talked about the 2 to 3 expectation. The demerger approach has already been supported by government and other key stakeholders. So I think we're in a good place there. It would end up with a JSE listing. We have still kept a trade sale option open, but from our point of view, the most direct line is the demerger route. That would still leave us with a shareholding in Cerrejón in Colombia. That is probably a more complex position to manage as we've got 2 other partners. But again, we would expect to exit in that same type of time frame, albeit the pathway is not as clear. We obviously have to make sure that we're managing both the relationships and the relationships with our colleagues. So pathway to carbon neutrality by 2040. Again, very important part of all of these conversations, and our broader portfolio is well set for the continued move towards environmental-led demand. We've seen early evolution of electric vehicles and some of the challenges of energy storage. Now we're seeing widespread investment in plans in hydrogen, first in China and Japan through their car companies, and now in Europe, with Germany in particular focusing on the hydrogen economy. We've been central to the drive towards the hydrogen as a founding member of the now very substantial Hydrogen Council. And when we talked about hydrogen five years ago, people used to roll their eyes. I suspect they're hearing and seeing a very different story today, and I'm proud that we've been on the front end of those conversations and that transition. It's also particularly interesting for us to see hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles will generally use more than 2 to 3 times the platinum that we use in normal operations than the equivalent sized diesel vehicles. and we expect their uptake to be slanted towards the heavier duty vehicles where battery rate becomes a limiting factor. And that's what I mean by hydrogen will operate more efficiently in the larger vehicles. At the same time, hydrogen applications for stationary power are potential drivers of further PGM demand. And similarly, there is potential application in electrolysis-driven hydrogen generation. So with that, in touching on a little bit of technology, I think I should pass across to the master. Tony, can you pick the ball up?
Thanks, Mike. Good day, everybody. Nice to be with you. We got the slides up? Okay. So over the past few months and with the COVID pandemic, our primary concern has been the health and welfare of our employees and their dependents. But notwithstanding this, the opportunities arising out of the shift in workplace practices, inability to move some of our key technical people across borders, and an increased dependency on technology, particularly remote, has not been lost on us. This, combined with an accelerated trend to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase circular economy principles, further cements our vision of a world enabled by future smart mining. Future smart mining is Anglo American's innovation-led approach to sustainable mining. These are step change innovations that will transform the nature of mining, how we source, mine, process, move and market our products, and how our stakeholders experience our business. It is about transforming our physical and societal footprint. We've got new technology on these screen movers. This is beyond me. Anyway, our conviction is that to be a successful miner into the future means being a catalyst for permanent positive change. We see ourselves as custodians of the land, managing our impact on the physical environment, water, biodiversity, and also people. Taking responsibility for emissions, improving general well-being, and driving regional economic growth. In a sense, we are looking to weave ourselves tighter into the fabric of society that develops today, but which doesn't limit tomorrow. In fact, it deliberately enhances it. Therefore, in our mining practices, we must solve for and lead in full mineral recovery, mining the periodic table, as it were, reducing water and energy intensity, eliminating greenhouse gases, whilst enabling and practicing circular economy principles. So I'm now going to the detailed technology update. And as you're aware, our journey in this space, as I'm outlining it now, is not new to you. We have led and continue to lead the industry across a broad front of technologies that together increase mineral output, preserve scarce water resources, reduce energy in key processes, and eliminates diesel and creates a greener future. We have very well progressed in a number of technologies. A subset of our ambition and very broad program I will now go into in some detail and give you the latest on their positioning. So firstly, bulk ore sorting is our one-step change innovation and takes advantage of ore heterogeneity. It is cost-effective in sorting material into low-value ore, which we reject, and high-value material, which we then send through the plant. This results in effectively more mineral output for a discrete volume of material. 3 demonstration plants have been successfully trialled, one in Brazil, Chile, and South Africa. We are seeing a 5 to 20% uplift in feed grade, at El Soldado 7 to 10%, and a 10% reduction in energy and water intensity. As a result, Full-scale units are under construction at our Mahalaquena and Los Bronces mines and are due to go live this year, with a third plan for Barro Alto in the near future. This slide here, more for the analysts, gives you some idea of the numbers and the detail of the program. Coarse particle recovery. Coarse particle recovery recovers minerals at larger particle sizes than conventional technologies. This means it uses less energy in the grinding process and increases throughput. Given this, we recover more water because sand is easier to drain than mud. 2 units are under construction in Chile and South Africa, with 3 further units planned for Los Bronces, Minas Rio, and Quellaveco. Consistent with what we've talked about in the past, what we're seeing with this is a 20% energy reduction and up to 85% water recovery, where normally we get 65 to 70%. We've talked in the past about tailings dams and the need to move away from wet dams. This leads us to hydraulic dry stack. So in our view, wet tailings storage facilities have no future in our industry. Today, wet tailings can be safely disposed of into hydraulic dry stacks, which rapidly dewater. This results in significant water recovery, and I mentioned the 85%, which goes along with the system around coarse particle recovery, and a stable dry stack that can be repurposed as safe, economically viable land. Construction of the first facility has already begun in our El Soldado mine, where we'll validate the engineering on a full scale and demonstrate to the regulators what we believe to be the future of the industry. I look forward to seeing some of you at El Soldado next year to see what this is looking like. But in my own view, this stuff will work. And it's a matter of someone taking a leap of faith around the engineering that we've done and actually saying we're not going to have any wet dams in the future. It's going to be all this because it will work. Digital. We're making significant difference on the digital front as well. We're transforming how the group leverages its data. We're building an integrated end-to-end data solution that brings together the discovery of mineral in the ground, the environment, the mining processes, the processing of final product, and the logistics and delivery to the port and our customers. This has been enabled by an increase in sensing of key parameters beyond our primary processes to the environment. This data transformation is reflected in our strategic mine planning and is developing our people and transforming our processes, improving health and safety, sustainability, and it's all through our technology program, which we call Voxel. And let me just share an example on this, but I think in short, what we're saying is we're now planning around all the environmental parameters. They're included in our decision-making, from strategic mine planning right down to the day-to-day activities. And what that means is that we will make decisions which perhaps we wouldn't have made in the past. If we think that the impact of a certain decision is environmentally unacceptable, then it will not happen, whereas in the past it was just around price. So we're live with our approach at Moranbah, and implementation is underway at Los Bronces and Mahalaquena. Just going back over the other points, we're modelling the usage of energy, carbon, greenhouse gas emissions into our digital operational platform module. This allows us, as I said, to establish trade-offs between production and pollution, and now helps our operations make more empowered, relevant, and timely decisions. We will also implement these solutions on waste material flow and base these on mineralogy. This allows for better classification of waste, knowing how much there is, where it is, and where it has come from, and it enables full accountability of future waste dumps. Fully documented accountability opens new pathways to waste usage and benefits that could not previously be considered and reduces our footprint. As I said earlier, just in that, I'm also really keen that we process to the periodic table. There are other minerals that we mine in our processes that we don't extract today economically, but someday in the future, someone may want usage of material that we've already mined. And if we can actually pinpoint where it is, then it's actually available for future generations to usefully utilise. So putting the individual pieces together along with the operating model, it's really about a system rather than individual pieces of kit. So we're really looking for systems value, and we're relentless in our innovation in this context and continue to mature and find new ways of releasing more value sooner. Integrating the outcomes into our operations using the Anglo-American operating model and P101 principles. It's about full potential. How do we put it all together? And whilst technology is developed in units, value is delivered in systems. And on a site, by carefully combining our growth ambitions with a detailed knowledge of our bottlenecks and the potential of each unit technology to release those constraints, provides us the ability to design and stage build a plant not yet experienced anywhere in the industry. With the planned expansion one day at Mahalaquena, we will bring together this new thinking to create a plant where we simultaneously step change metal recoveries and reduce water and energy consumption. New production will match our ability to increase mining rates, delivering value as we grow. And construction, as we know it, will be atypical for our industry, future-proofing again, yet to be conceived technology developments. The timing on when we land that is indeterminate. But what we're seeing, just putting these concepts across projects in our portfolio, is the potential to improve energy usage by 30 to 50%. Water recovery, we've set at 85, but the time to design and build with improvements of around 30%. What you're seeing on this slide is if you like, a graphic of this new concept. It looks very different to the current processing plants that you will have seen. And it enables us to future-proof new technology. What we've always worried about, you build a new plant, they sit there then for 20 years, stuck in a time warp of technology. And we're designed now this new concept where we can rack new technology in and out into the system as it becomes available. So these plants will be flexible and they will always be current. So now going on to carbon neutrality. We've committed, as Mark said, to 8 of our operations being carbon neutral by 2030. It's a multi-pronged pathway, starting with the use of green sources of energy, like wind and solar, removing diesel haulage, fundamentally changing the power equation of crushing and grinding for processing. And if we can solve all of those, then I have no doubt that we will be physically carbon neutral. Let me first talk to the hydrogen truck. As a standalone option, renewables offer limited financial gain. By considering them in a system, though, a different picture emerges. By producing excess solar, one can free electrons to produce hydrogen cost effectively. We will substitute diesel drives for more efficient electric drives, extending battery range with hydrogen fuel cells where appropriate. And this is especially relevant for large mining equipment, but also actually relevant for any large industrial use. The impact of COVID has delayed our progress on the first cell-driven mining truck, but we're still planning for first motion at Mogalakwena in Q1 next year. The fuel cell battery engine is currently at a test facility undergoing integration and performance validation before it is moved to Mogalakwena and fitted into one of our 300-tonne mining trucks. We're progressing well with the construction of the hydrogen facility at Mogalakwena to provide the hydrogen necessary for the truck. Diesel trucks consume around 1.5 billion litres of diesel annually. And hydraulic electric will allow us to move towards zero emission handling. It's really quite key as I said, in solving the equation. On the crushing and grinding of rock, I'd like to talk about microwave. New technologies continue to emerge, microwave preconditioning of ores to increase throughputs and improve mineral liberation. We could see 20% reduction in energy intensity and a 10% increase in throughput through the use of microwaves. Improving the liberation at a coarser size, which would also allow us to feed into the coarse particle recovery and hydraulic stack. And again, it comes back to this whole system approach. Combined with new rapid sprint developments and modular construction techniques, we see the time of mine construction shorter and alter industry views of risk. Microwave is currently in one of our sprints, and we're making quite incredible progress in this whole area. This is a new one for you. It's the deep energy sink. And we've clearly, with having solar generation of power, then the issue of no power at night and how do you store it is clearly one of the main issues to be solved. Through some smart thinking by one of our guys, we've come up with a concept, as I said, we call the deep energy sink. And put simply, this is using water in a mine, pumping the water out to the surface during the day using excess energy from the sun, and then at night allowing that water to go back underground and in that process generate power. At one of the mines that we have done this design around, we've got potential to effectively store 800 megawatts. So this is actually very real. And the days where you saw a mine as perhaps a legacy, those places that have actually got an old mine where they can actually utilise this technique have now got a real asset. And around industrial areas like ourselves, it solves potentially a large part of that energy storage equation. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a snapshot of where we've got to with some of our innovation and progress. I'd actually like to talk to you for a lot longer, but I wasn't allowed to. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Anik Michaud.
Thank you, Tony. That's a fantastic update, which I think gives us all a view of the sheer breadth of the technology program and the benefits that this work will bring to make our business more sustainable in every sense. Turning to some of the social aspects of our work, it has been 17 years since we first launched our socioeconomic assessment toolbox, also known as SEAT. And it's been 11 years since we launched the first version of the Social Way. We have now combined these, and this year we launched a new integrated social way management system that is aligned with the operating model and the sustainable mining plan. And it reflects emerging societal expectations of our industry. Like earlier versions, we have made this publicly available for other companies to use. And also, and so much more importantly, so that our stakeholders know what our standards are and what they can expect from us. Through transparency and accountability, we aim to build trust. Please do take a look at our Social Way microsite on the Anglo American website. We've put a lot of effort into demystifying key social performance concepts through animations and infographics. We continue to ground our approach in international best practice. And under the Sustainable Mining Plan, we have added a commitment, and Mark mentioned this earlier, to the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, or IRMA, and the Responsible Jewelry Council. Examples of the international standards that we follow include the IFC performance standards. So IFC performance standard 5, 7, and 8 for resettlements, indigenous people, and cultural heritage. UN guiding principles on business and human rights, and voluntary principles on security and human rights are just to name a few. To be true to our purpose, to reimagine mining to improve people's lives, we're also taking a holistic approach beyond just focusing on preventing harm, but also looking to see how we can support host communities in their own sustainable development aspirations. This, of course, involves extensive and ongoing stakeholder engagement. A focus of the Social Way is understanding local context and responding when these change. And as Mark mentioned earlier, our response to COVID in the community is a testament to this. Mark was very clear at the outset of the pandemic that we would continue to support our communities. And every site has developed and is currently implementing a community response plan. A management system is only a system, but it becomes a practice when it is truly embedded in the culture. And we are looking to have a culture that promotes safe, responsible production. Good policies do not achieve much if they're not implemented effectively. So we have put as much effort into the governance of social performance as we have into standards and guidance. A key principle for us is that responsibility for social performance is in the line, and the implementation of the Social Way rests with line managers at site. Only our local leadership teams can really understand their local context and how these evolve. Plus, almost any operational decision can affect host communities and our license to operate. So you can't divorce responsibility for operations from responsibility for community relations. Because of that, we now require every site to have a social performance management committee chaired by the general manager and involving all relevant department heads, including a social performance manager who not only has a seat at the table, but a strong voice. However, we recognize that social issues are some of the most complex challenges we face. So every site is supported by a central team that has leading experts in everything from human rights, resettlement, indigenous people, through to socioeconomic development. We also recognize that our board, investors, and external stakeholders want evidence of how well we are managing social issues. So, as we have for the past 10 years, we report Social Way performance for every operation to our board sustainability committee annually, and these results are independently verified and assured. Finally, and again, as required by the Sustainable Mining Plan, we have stepped up our requirements for stakeholder engagement through our community engagement forums, which aim to strengthen the participation of stakeholders in shaping, monitoring, and evaluating sites' social performance. I'm sure that you can appreciate that we're getting a lot of inquiries at the moment about cultural heritage. So I just wanted to briefly outline our approach. Firstly, going back to the first version of the Social Way in 2009, we have followed the relevant IFC performance standards, and I mentioned those before. We believe this means our approach is based in internationally accepted good practice, including where certain forms of tangible or intangible cultural heritage may not be specifically covered by host country legislation. Secondly, we have integrated cultural heritage concerns into key business processes as part of the Social Way. And it is worth mentioning here that we have found that having a social way as one-stop shop for all of our community-related standards has really helped with the integration. Finally, the nature of mine development means that cultural heritage management needs to be an ongoing activity. So for example, as well as working to cultural heritage management plans, which include both proactive, so the survey and impact assessment, and reactive approaches to manage an unplanned event. All sites are required to have a chance find procedure to proactively plan for the response to unknown heritage resources that are uncovered. We know that to create shared benefit from resource development, we must proactively manage potential adverse impacts from our activities. Without exception, we must respect and protect the human rights, livelihoods, culture, beliefs, and heritage in our host communities and countries. We also work with local communities to identify assets and resources that are of value to them to truly understand what is appropriate. So if you allow me, I'd like to bring this approach to life with an example from Minas Rio in Brazil. In the process of developing the project, an important prehistoric site within the construction area was discovered, the stove shelter. The site contains references to the oldest populations in Brazil who inhabited the region more than 10,000 years ago. We carried out an extensive survey and archaeological research. As part of the impact assessment process, the project team took the decision voluntarily to avoid impacts on the site. Although the impact assessment was for local permitting and Brazilian requirements are actually very similar to international good practice standards and require the involvement of an independent cultural heritage expert. The end result was that we changed the layout of the site and we moved the location of the ore conveyor belt to avoid impacting the cave containing the stove shelter. Across the project as a whole, we protected an additional 40 archaeological sites and more than 200,000 archaeological remains were found and recovered. Cultural heritage is but just one example of the type of impact that our activities could have on our stakeholders. But it is critical, of course, that we continually assess all potential social and human rights impacts and risks. This is why having a comprehensive and integrated system for social performance management that provides for robust internal and external governance is key to delivering meaningful social performance outcomes. And lastly, for me, I would be remiss if we didn't touch on governance. Of course, good governance has to underpin everything we do as a global organization. Mark talked earlier about becoming a trusted corporate leader, but we must also ensure our bread and butter governance is in check. Our sustainability as a business relies on best practice corporate governance. And this, of course, all starts at the top. To create a culture that supports us in living up to our purpose, we as a GMC have had many conversations about the type of leadership required, as well as the policies and procedures that need to be in place. How we report performance and progress internally and externally again demonstrate the holistic approach to running the business, as Mark showed earlier in his presentation with his 7 pillars of value, his scorecard. And that helps drive the leadership culture across the company in terms of clear expectations that we all consider full impact of our decisions in relation to all stakeholders in our day-to-day work. The board and its committees provide necessary oversight, including the responsibility of the board to ensure that purpose, culture, and strategy are aligned. We also welcome the increasing role of the board in engaging with our employees to ensure their perspectives form part of our decision-making. Stakeholder dialogue is a critical piece in terms of our ability to listen and engage. We have set up a number of national level accountability forums where our aim is to build trust in mining as an inclusive fair deal, listening to potentially critical stakeholders, and we do, and measuring ourselves against wider external indicators, including the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We recognize that these wider goals, of course, are beyond the reach of any one organization. For example, SDGs 1, 2, and 10 on poverty, hunger, and inequality. But we have to be open, responsive, and collaborative if we are to achieve in any measure of sustainable impact. We also want to make sure that the conversations at the national level are not just theoretical, but connected to the realities on the ground and tying closely to the local level accountability forms or the community engagement forms that I mentioned in my previous section. On ethics and transparency, our code of conduct underpins our values, applies to every one of us, and is fully embedded across the company, clearly setting out our expectations for ethical behavior. And our Your Voice whistleblowing service for everyone inside and outside Anglo American is designed to enable reporting without fear of retaliation and supports the culture we're driving for. On the transparency front, we have for many years led the way with our public disclosure on tax and total economic contributions for all the countries where we operate, as well as being very open about our board-approved tax strategy, all very much supporting a strong tax governance program that provides a basis for broader positive and trusted engagement with stakeholders. We have also established an internal cross-functional ethics, transparency, and accountability working group who discuss and tackle these issues, as well as society's growing expectations. And lastly, but fittingly perhaps, to reiterate quite just how integrated sustainability or ESG considerations are in our strategy, in our standards, our policies and goals, and in our management systems and planning. For example, our resource development plans and our life of asset plans. If we consider capital allocation for a moment, we are thinking about things differently. Yes, sustainability considerations have long been part of our investment decision-making in a qualitative, risk-based way. But we see many opportunities to embed sustainability quantitatively and to look at opportunities from a value creation angle rather than only value protection. This is where we're going, and it is also shaping our approach to looking at a wider range of financing and partnering opportunities, potentially finding ways we can create enabling environments to encourage capital to be deployed to help unlock some of these industries' biggest challenges across the entire value chain. It's not a challenge at Anglo American. We see this all as an opportunity. Mark, back over to you.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Anik. For everybody that knows us fairly well, you will probably understand that Anik keeps us all on a pretty tight leash. So I'm going to be a little bit naughty and go off piste for a second, just to reflect back on what Tony and Anik have actually said before I do my short wrap. Firstly, I'm lucky because I get to learn of some wonderful people in our GMC team, Tony and Anik and the rest of the crew. Everyone's engaged and we're all part of the conversation. Picking up Anik's key point, our social way has been in the organisation for 17 years. It is part of who we are. And if I could make the point, and I've been lucky to join the organisation in 2013, and the way I put it, and what we've tried to do in everything we do, is to make sure that the social way is not simply a system, or it's not simply about what you do. It's actually a way of being. And you can't systemize that approach. It has to be in the culture. It starts off with the way you operate, you systemize that, but ultimately the culture then reflects a way of being. And I think from my experience and my time and our work together, it's about how we show up as a leadership team, and that social way is a way of being. In terms of Tony's points, I think you can see his enthusiasm for change, and it's shared by all of the team members. When Tony said some of these technologies are indeterminate, it's not because he hasn't got his foot on the pedal or he's not driving hard. It's that some of these concepts are so new and so different to what governments have seen, they don't have approval processes that yet match what we're doing. And so we're actually working with governments to help them with their approval processes. This modular concept inside the walls of a plant require a different way of thinking by governments that provide approvals for these processes. And some of the environmental approvals take 3 to 5 years. So we're working equally hard on actually changing the system to ensure the mining industry can be more innovative, progressive, and react much quicker and be proactive in the process. So we actually have to change the system in which we operate. And so Tony's comment about timing is not because they're taking longer than they should. They're doing it quicker than anyone. But the system actually isn't quick enough, and we have to change the system to get there quicker. We'll get to 2030. What we want to do is get there a lot quicker, and we have to change the system inertia to get there. And the other point I'm going to make is for those that know of the history of the Eden Project, and there's a book called 101 Things to Do with a Hole in the Ground. Tony's little power analogy or the description gives you one of those 100 things that he's working through in terms of all the things we can do with holes in the ground. So, committed to delivery. For those that have heard us talk in the last couple of years, we think about our business and returns in a very simple way, 3 parts. The ultimate measure of our success as a company in delivering returns to shareholders is in the form of free cash flow, in that it provides the cash to pay a dividend, it provides the cash to reinvest and make sure our business is sustainable, it provides the cash to improve our business and to grow our business where it's appropriate. It's all about generating cash. And you'll see that our sustainable cash flows continued to improve over the last 7 years. It's about efficiency. That is, you can invest lots of money in the ground and create some cash, but if you're not making a 15% return on capital employed or better, you're likely destroying value. And whilst we might have in our iron ore business the lowest cost assets, and we've certainly paid some pretty hard and learned some pretty hard lessons at Minas Rio, at Kumba, on the other hand, is the best returning iron ore business in the industry. They're doing a great job. We've got to keep reducing our costs, but the return on capital is exceptional. And across the portfolio, 19% a year on ROCE, 3 years running. When we started at 9%, with a lower price deck, we've more than doubled our return on capital employed. And on sustainability, the 7 pillars, we understand that you can't deliver the first 2 numbers on a sustainable basis unless you've got the other 7 areas going along in the right direction and making sure that you're sustainable. This is who we are, this is what we are, thinking about 2030, thinking about 2040, and making sure that we've got a business that goes for the long term. And consistent with that, it has to be the long term in terms of the communities, the countries in which we operate, and on a global basis in terms of the industry that we're part of. And it's a wonderful industry. In terms of our pathway to a greener world, I think it's important again to reinforce those points you've heard from Tony. We continue to evolve the portfolio, and that is how we're driving our pathway to a greener world. And this fits with our commitment towards the environment and minimising our impact both in terms of water, energy and physical footprint. Today, we're producing 15% more product in half the assets. So our capital intensity, our footprint intensity has improved, but at the same time, we're improving our physical outcomes in terms of environment and all of those other key measures. We've also committed to making our operations carbon neutral by 2040. And we've backed that with a pathway. It's not a number that we threw out there and said, well, 2050, we've got to be there, so let's throw that out and then try and work out if we can or we can't get there. We've got a pathway. There's still a lot of planning and work to be done, but we've got a pretty good idea of how we're going to get there. And as Tony talks about the systems and what we evolve, and there will be different programs and different solutions in different areas, but we know how those packages fit together. Technology, our digital work, and the rigor of our sustainable mining plan underpins our commitments and the work we're doing. Everything is integrated and mutually reinforcing, and that's part of the process. And that's how we've changed our business for the long term. Bulk ore sorting, coarse particle flotation are just a couple of examples of the technology areas that Tony and the team have focused on, and he's working with his operating colleagues to make sure that that information flow both ways helps us find the solutions that work for the long term in each one of our business, by asset, by commodity, and by the group as a whole. As I've said before, sustainability has to be embedded in the business. It's not a nice to have or a conversation you have at the end of the day. It's part of everything we do, and it is our commitment to society in its broadest sense. We've already have a very different portfolio to our major peers, so we've continued the portfolio evolution. Our suite of products suits demand from a consumer-driven world with a growing population. An increasingly electrified world as demand for the demand in the developing world, amenities expands and the grids follow. And a greener world as a focus on preserving our environment leads to changing behaviour in a range of areas. Increased renewables, the growing hydrogen economy, tighter emission standards, and more modern, cleaner steel making. We want to go from being something that happens in the industry. We want to be the leader in driving change, making that new world possible. And that's a very different place to where our industry has been. And that's where we're trying to drive our company and with our partners in the industry to make this a very different industry in the world and in the conversations of what the future looks like. More than half of our output is focused on later cycle demand, and that number will increase as our thermal coal operations move out of our portfolio, replaced by growth in copper and crop nutrients specifically. We are positioned to run the business sustainably and being disciplined with our capital to grow the business sustainably as well. And with that, very happy to hand back to Anik, and we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Again, for questions, please go to menti.com and use the code 5484605. A reminder to please begin your typed question with your full name and the organization you represent, and also to keep your question concise. We're going to try to get through as many as we can on a variety of topics, and I may also group them together if possible. So I think the first one is to Mark and or Tony, and it's from Sergei Donsky, Société Générale. What are the pros and cons for fuel cells versus batteries as the technology to power haul trucks?
Tony, right up your alley.
Look, our trucks use both fuel cells as range extenders for batteries. So in essence, they use both. Batteries on their own weigh too much and charge too slowly to be too effective in a 24/7 operation. Fuel cells on their own don't have the instantaneous power required. So it's actually a combination is the sweet spot.
And that is even more important as the larger the truck and the better fuel cell economies, Tony. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
Okay. So Ian Russo, Barclays, can you give an idea of the overall cost to achieve net zero by 2040? Do you plan to make margin abatement curves available for your key assets?
Okay. Firstly, the way we think, if you look at the capital allocation across the portfolio, we talk about it in three buckets, and I think you have to understand this, Ian, because it's a total system approach. Today, we talk about sustaining capital on our current production base of about 3.1 billion. And Paul, you jump in if you hear me saying something you don't agree with. It's about 3.1 billion. We have then we then have another 750 million that we allocate to asset depletion or resource depletion, which runs at about 3% per year. Most mining companies don't talk about that. We do in the oil and gas sector, but we take that into account in the way we plan our business. So Quellaveco is worth 2.5 operations, for example. We then have an enhancement stroke. Part of this is also our asset replacement of about 300 to 500, which picks up many of the things Tony's doing. And then you have the major project step-out strategy, which is a Quellaveco, a Woodsmith, a Sakatti, that drives our growth above and where we are today, but it's not done on a sustainable basis. So you've got those buckets. Now, the point that Tony makes, and it's absolutely right, is the 300 to 500 that we're investing in these new technologies has generally got very rapid paybacks, so it improves the economies of the operation. So, for example, a 30% energy reduction for us on a 25% cost input is a significant a significant saving and investment return. But the 300 to 500 actually works to reduce the 3.1 sustainable number and the new capital numbers as an entire system. So, Tony, do you want to just pull that apart a bit so the guys get a concept that it's actually a self-enforcing circle?
Yeah, it's fundamentally changing the capital intensity equation for the business, and the modular approach that I was talking to. I mean, they're conservative numbers, and you know, and almost bootstrapping your way through into a project. I mean, I think you're familiar with that term. So there won't be this huge lump of money, you know, that in my mind that you need to do this. We'll do this as a normal part of our business, and we'll get there pretty quickly because it makes real sense to do it. Stephen?
Yeah, Tony, I would agree. Nothing I'm seeing from your teams or you scares me. And so I'd encourage people to think about it a little bit differently, because what's good for the business is good from a sustainable mine planning point of view. And as you say, the rapid payback, the relatively small amounts of capital that cycle through quickly, I think this is a real differentiator for us in how we're thinking about this.
So that 300 to 500 we're talking about, Ian, is what you might look at for your models, and Ian and Paul will help you with that. But it's got very good returns, and it ultimately impacts on what we're spending in each other part of the process. So we'll try and unpack that over the next 12 months, and if there's a better way to present it next year, we'll see what we can do to help you with that. But that's the logic of it.
Okay, next question. We'll go back to Ian in a little bit. Tyler Broda, RBC, has thinking on wider hydrogen fuel cell adoption changed in the last 12 months? Industry, remote power generation, and what are the biggest opportunities beyond trucks?
Look, I've got a few views, but firstly, let me just go to Tony for a minute. He may have some views, and then I'll talk about. I'm also involved in oil and gas, obviously, with my involvement with Total, so I can give you a broader perspective. But Tony, you take that first.
Tyler, thanks for the question. It's a good one. Look, I think the one thing that we've learned out of the truck exercises, we've got a really good understanding now of the hydrogen business and where the connections are, and you know. And our view is not just limited ultimately to trucks. You know, if you've got a facility at site, you know, where you're producing hydrogen, what are the analogous businesses? If you mine the periodic table of your local area, what are the business opportunities around that? And I think it's got enormous links into the whole sustainability place, because you can start to provide communities with potential hydrogen. You can make ammonia, you can store stuff. It just opens up, if you like, a whole suite of business opportunities, and we're certainly looking at that whole spectrum. Mark?
Yeah, and to take that beyond, so if you think about it this way, Tyler, firstly, renewables provide you with a clean primary energy source. Our use of renewables then to produce hydrogen is about a storage medium and a clean energy application that gives you the benefit of off-peak or distributed use of a clean energy. So think of that in the transport industry. If you look at trains, you look at aircraft, you look at ships, I think that's where hydrogen will be deployed initially because of the things Tony talked about in answering the first question. Because of the application, you use battery with hydrogen, you get the best of both worlds. And obviously, as the gear gets bigger, batteries become limited. Now, battery technologies are improving, but we think, and certainly everything we've seen, the cost of producing hydrogen and the technologies are evolving much quicker and faster, and we think longer term will be more competitive. The other thing that hydrogen provides you with its storage and flexibility is to provide energy to areas where there's little infrastructure. So already in South Africa, LNG and other products are being distributed around the country into areas where you can't get energy and power. And South Africa's issue is not that it doesn't have land, it actually doesn't have development. So looking at and being part of a solution to help them develop the country, or Africa or South America, where we don't have those distributed networks, hydrogen gets to play a very important role. And as its efficiency improves, then you'll see more hydrogen come into the smaller vehicles because it becomes quite competitive when we talk scale. So it will, in my view, exponentially increase in demand as the cost to generate improves and its versatility is understood on a broader market.
Okay. Back to Ian, Barclays. And Tony, this one's for you again, I think. To what extent is the deployment of technology such as bulk ore sorting, CPR, already included in the 21-22 production guidance? Is there upside potential on guidance?
You're on mute, Tony.
I was wondering when that would happen.
It's the line of the year.
Look, I think it's fair to say that the budgeting process that we're now going through, I've seen the most mature response in the company towards P101 and new technology. So when the technologies are, if you like, officially rolled into the businesses, they are being included in the numbers. Current budget process is not final, and Stephen and Mark have to go through that. But from what I'm seeing, it's pretty decent at the moment.
And we'll update those numbers in the December market update that we give. Paul, nod at me if I'm correct there in terms of the 21 and 22 period. That's correct.
Yeah. I think we said, Ian, that the technology contributions would be back-ended, but more of that will be P101 stuff. The bulk sorting, coarse particle flotation and all of those benefits sort of start flowing through 23 and really starting to have an impact there, because one of the things we're navigating are the approval processes with governments, Tony. I think that's been interesting because they're not geared to handle these new technologies that we're coming up with.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff in 21, but you really see it kick off 22 onwards.
Okay. Next one. From Danielle Chigumira at Bernstein, of the net CO2 reduction by 2040, how much of this comes from already identified projects and how much is currently unidentified?
Tony, when you want to put it?
Look, I think we've actually got our head around the key areas to work with. And if you look at, let's say the top 3 or 4, vent air methane is the biggest contributor. We've got some really, really interesting work going on there now. And normally the issue is how do you actually concentrate the methane to where you can flare it? And that's about 6-7%. Some of the early work that Donovan Waller and his team are doing has been able to concentrate it up to 16. And that opens all sorts of pathways. So potentially, it's early days, but potentially there's a pathway there. The next one really is electricity and how do you get green power? I think the real challenge there is actually not the technology, but what we are seeing is that as you go green, it's really important that the infrastructure or the distribution costs need to be rationalised because it's disproportionate now to the actual generation cost. So, many ways it's actually preferable, in a technical sense, that you have the power on site. The diesel, well, I think we've got a clear pathway, and I think, as I said earlier today, that the microwave sprint, I think, helps us unlock comminution. So I think we're actually got the bulk of the activities collared. We won't know exactly how they finalise, but we've got all the right pieces currently pretty aggressively being pushed.
I think one of the points there, Tony, as well is I used the term, and they told me I had to use this term, the natural, I can't even remember the name, the natural opportunity. So, for example, at Woodsmith, so we talk about the technical changes we're driving. That's where the bulk of the improvement comes from. We also see the opportunity in the land that we manage or is being developed as a consequence of our developments where we create carbon sinks. Now, the world is going to need a lot greater carbon sinks. But I tell you what, in 2035, you will not be able to rely on or bank an offset. So forget it. So, yep, it's a contingency, but we are not constructing a pathway based on offsets. Anybody that talks offsets, in my view, in the future, hasn't really thought about the future. What we're thinking about are what we call insets, or those things that we can do inside the boundary to help give us credit. Now, the measurement of those credits becomes quite problematic. So we think they can make a contribution and probably help close any gap we may have, but there's a lot more work to be done. And we recognise that you can't rely on offsets. What you can do is do a lot more in the areas that you manage and operate within. And we think that's an area of work that will cover anything we may not be able to cover. But as Tony said, I think we've got most of the issues pretty well covered.
Was nature-based solutions what you were looking for, Mark?
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, again from Danielle. Given SA's geopolitics, how likely is a thermal coal divestment? Isn't it more responsible to keep the assets and run down production?
So, in our case, the conversation with shareholders remains an important part of who we are. And for thermal coal, it represents less than 5% of our revenue and a much smaller part of our EBITDA. And if at the end of the day, shareholders are going to make a material amount of shareholders are making a decision not to be in our business for that reason, that's something we do consider. And that's important. And we want to make that point because there'll be many shareholders. But I want to make another point. We don't own the coal that we mine per se. It's owned by the country, it's owned by the people. And we've been a long-term player in a number of jurisdictions, and we are very serious about our responsibility to the government, to the communities, to our customers, to our employees. And so our just transition is about making decisions about the portfolio that's going to deliver the best returns for shareholders in the long term, but at the same time is absolutely consistent with who we are and our commitment to make a positive contribution to society. So our commitment to the hydrogen economy, precious metals in that mix, And all of those new technologies that creates the new future, we're going to be part of the solution. So how we manage our position out of thermal coal, it has to be done appropriately. It has to be done with those stakeholders, and we've done that. We've been criticised by some for taking a little more time in South Africa with Cerrejón. In our case, it has taken time to engage with governments and communities, and I make no apology for that. It's about just transition, and that's who we are. But at the same time, from our point of view, we've actually done very well from an economic point of view over that time frame. A little tougher in Cerrejón, but I think you have to manage all of those issues, and I think we've made the right decisions. We've managed all of the key players in an appropriate way, and at the same time, we continue to improve the value delivery to shareholders. And I think you've got to get all of those balances right.
Okay. From another Danielle Gleason, International Mining. And Tony, I suspect this is for you. Where does battery electric equipment feature in your future developments? Are you applying this technology at your underground mines, for instance?
We've already got hydrogen haulage at some of our facilities in South Africa. The aim is, basically to, over time, replace the current diesel fleet with the hydrogen battery equipment. That's always been part of the game plan.
Okay. Next one is from Alain Gabriel, Morgan Stanley. Can you remind us about your water permit expiry dates at Los Bronces and Collahuasi, and how your thinking is evolving around building desalination capacity?
Tony, you want to do that, or are you happy me to do it?
I think we'll do a duet. Certainly at Collahuasi, the planning is being, or engineering is being done now, looking at the desal options, and I would suspect that will come forward in the next 6 to 12 months. Los Bronces is probably an issue further out that we're currently looking at, but clearly water is an issue there.
Yeah, Paul, have you got that date? Sorry, Tom. Have you got that date specifically, Paul?
Yeah, so Alain, it's from mid-2024 on Collahuasi, but there's another one in 2028. So it's not like it all disappears in mid-2024 or anything like that. But with the technologies, the grey water and the recycling that we're also looking at, that will also help offset the current usages.
Yeah, because don't forget, at Collahuasi, we've got the push to 170, almost 180 tonnes. We're almost there, I think, in terms of that anyway. And then the next push to about 220 tonnes an hour will require water, or will require longer-term solutions. So really, it's getting the match between what we save with our new processes versus the need for desalination, because I think there's no doubt right across Chile there will be an expectation. And so we're trying to get ahead of that curve with the technologies, as Tony said. So I think we're pretty well placed. We still may have to invest, and it's likely we'll still have to invest in some desalination capacity, because we've still got capacity above and beyond what we're talking to in terms of the future. I mean, both of the assets have got potential to do much better over time. And so we don't want water to be the constraint. These technologies will put us in a very good position.
Okay, we're hearing from Adam Matthews. On the innovative tailings technology, firstly, great work. Secondly, is this innovation being shared across the industry so that the sector can move together to address this systemic risk?
It hasn't been shared as at this point, because we're still basically developing it. But we've taken the approach, and the way we shared our tailings standard to the industry is that tailings and safety related matters are things that we will naturally share. So at the right point in the technical development, we will absolutely share it.
Okay. Mark, do you have anything to add on that? No?
Tony's point's actually very important. The tailings standard and the work we did on tailings was something very open with. The new technologies connect a whole range of different things. We don't want to be slowed up. And from our point of view, we're running as fast as we can. And exactly as Tony said, for those elements that will contribute to safety and security, we will share. But there's a lot of other technologies we're developing that will give us a competitive advantage. And so we're making sure we drive those hard. But all of the safety stuff will be shared with our colleagues.
Okie dokie. Next, Sylvain Brunet, Exane BNP Paribas. Please detail KPIs at middle management and top management levels associated to ESG target delivery.
Okay, so I have my actually performance scorecard here. I guess from our point of view, the ESG targets are 20%. I can't find the thing. At 20%, we have in our targets, short term and longer term, we have injury frequency rates, as you would expect, which are lag measures. But we also have milestones on our progress on the elimination of fatalities work, and 3 key issues this year that we have to make sure we've got in place. So we're making good progress there. From an environmental point of view, again, lag measures, but also progress on things we're doing on implementation of the social programs. And those, the ESG component of the bonus, the short-term basis is 20%, and we've got a similar percentage on the longer-term work. But again, the measures are actually different given the different time frames. So it's around 20% in the packages, and certainly we continue to review that, and we've been continually increasing the component in terms of our key measures. We can actually provide can provide you with a detailed summary of what those measures are. If you'd like that, just give us a note and we'll send you something as well.
So to follow up with Paul.
Yep, no problem at all.
Okay. So Thomas Strader Research, how are you dealing with the mega drought in Chile? Well, we kind of addressed that a little bit. Do you want to just say a few more words on that, Mark?
Yeah, the biggest impact for us from the drought has been at Los Bronces. And again, water harvesting has been absolutely key. We've done a lot of work on making sure we don't waste a drop. As you'd expect, the behavioural stuff has been central. We've been working really well with Codelco, managing. They've got an excess, or they've got a water surplus, so we've been helping them with their issue. And the whole technology front will be part of the longer term solution that we've talked about. The only issue with that is it requires time to get it through the regulators, because in making those circuit changes, they need a whole environmental feasibility study, which takes 3 years. So we're trying to condense that down, but the guys have done a good job. They've had a pretty good rain season. I think it's about 10% short of an annual average, which is pretty good for us these days, given we're probably, I think we're 100% more efficient, or 50% less water consumption on an apples for apples basis today, Tony?
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Danielle Bernstein again. How is a 20% ROCE compatible with a waterless, concentrated, and modern mine, which will likely drive unit cost inflation? Are rising prices expected to close the gap?
Well, no, it's reducing our costs, period.
Yeah, that's where I think people need to change their mindset about how they're thinking about these initiatives, that with the water savings, the energy savings, the extra recovery, the things are actually combined and fit beautifully together with the operations.
Yeah, so what Stephen's saying is that what we're doing with P101 and the other programs is we're increasing our productive capacity. So we're improving our operating efficiencies. We're using less energy. We're using less water. So we're reducing our operating costs, and our production per person is going up, so our costs are going down. So what we're saying is these projects are improving our return on capital, period.
and the capital side, Mark, to with the bootstrapping, will give you a different shape to the curve and probably an absolute reduction as well.
So we're working with a different paradigm, and that's what Tony and Stephen are saying. We went from it and said, okay, how do we change our inputs and drive energy consumption down, our efficiency? So maybe I'll step back. We focused on energy efficiency inside the mine gate and said the best way for us to reduce greenhouse gases is to use less energy per pound or tonne of product produced. So just to explain, coarse particle flotation, we with the bulk sorting, we actually improved the grade going into the plant because we're more selective in the mining. And we put it through the process, and instead of grinding it to bug dust, we grind it to chili flake. And the new flotation technologies that Tony and the guys have developed is they don't need to grind it to bug dust to get an 80% recovery of copper. They can grind it to chili flake and get the same recovery. That means you use 30% less energy to actually produce a pound of copper. And the waste that they produce, because it's chili flake, they can suck the water back out that's contained in mud, that used to be contained in mud, and use that back in the circuit. Now that reduces our water consumption by 50%. So in that process, we reduce our operating cost by 10%. So the capital is the best returning capital we got in the business. And that's the paradigm shift that we're working. We're saying, turn the industry on its head. This is going to be the best opportunity we've ever seen, and we can use it with the authorities to change the industry, change our cost structures, and we can do it 5 years quicker than anyone else. That's what we're about.
Okay,
hope that helps.
We're at, it's 2:00 now. We'll take 2 additional questions, and then we'll call it a day. Liam Fitzpatrick, is the mining industry close to forming an agreement over how to report on and then target Scope 3 emissions?
It's in the conversation, but we're not, I think I'd be optimistic saying we're close. We do have different views. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we can get a lot closer. I think the ICMM is a good forum for those conversations, and you've got people all wanting to do the right thing, but I still think we've got a little way to go. I'd be guessing at putting too tight a frame on it. We'd be happy to go very quickly, but we're probably, to be honest, we're probably more open in reporting a lot more than most would be comfortable with. So that's probably going to require a bit more work.
Okay. And last question from Adam Matthews, Church of England Pension Board. And this one is to you, Mark. On sustainability, how do you ensure continuous internal challenge and that the board has access to this? Sustainability is a continuous journey.
It's a good question, actually. I think firstly, internally, we challenge each other, but you can get to groupthink very quickly. So, and Adam, you'd be aware of this, our faith-based engagements was something we thought about quite carefully and said, you know what, why wouldn't you engage those that are most critical of us and our industry and think about what they're looking for and understand how we can take their expectations into our thinking and answer their questions? Because in the end, you know, we're talking, in most cases, we talk to ourselves. So transparency, engagement, and engagement with faith-based groups, local stakeholders. I mean, we're the first company that stood up at the Junior Indaba. And we've had 2 goes now, and the second conversation was much better than the first. And somebody asked me, why would you want to go there? And I said, well, it's not because I like getting yelled at. It's because what we're told is different. It's from the heart. It's people wanting us to make a difference in ways we hadn't thought about. And when Cardinal Turkson with Pope said meaningful existence. If you can help those communities achieve meaningful existence, that is what's important to them, then you'll have made a difference. Now, whether it's the UN or it's your team, Adam, or the broader faith group, or it's our local communities, we have to be open to their thoughts, and that has to be how we start the conversation in our business about how we can make a difference. So it's about being open to these inputs and being open to be challenged and criticised and unfortunately sometimes being yelled at. But that's when you can make a difference, when you understand and you listen and you set about transforming your business to be the future.
And you just touching on how the board follows this?
So the board's been very supportive of the approach. The governance process and getting inputs from external parties, the same thing we do, I think is very important. And they want to see what we've done to get those inputs. And that governance process is still evolving, but the board's been very constructive and supportive in bringing that transparency, and the fact that we report what we do in the annual report and in this process, I think demonstrates their support for the process as well.
Okay, I think we're going to call it a day and thank everybody for joining us today. And please continue staying safe and well. Thank you.